Chapter 15-17. Hearing Cheng Hifeng's words, the cultivators of the Azure Forest Dynasty and Cloud Sword Dynasty glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Although the reputation of the Tiangang dynasty was rather resounding in the test competition, they were only a group of opportunistic people in their eyes, and their strength was far from being able to compare with them. A small dynasty was a small dynasty. No matter how they tried to please the crowd, they weren't on the same level as them in the end. They're only cannon fodder here, and they won't be able to obtain anything in the end. The gaze of the Azure Forest Dynasty's Fang Wenqing was slightly cold. Although there were many cultivators in the vicinity, in his eyes, the opponents he needed to pay attention to were only the Martial Dynasty and Cloud Sword Dynasty. As for the other cultivators, he didn't take them seriously at all. A wisp of a mocking smile appeared on the face of the Cloud Sword Dynasty's Yujun Fei. Fang Wenqing, don't be too careless. A small dynasty's team is able to obtain such results in the test competition. This isn't something an ordinary person can do. Hearing this, Fang Wenqing couldn't help but glance at Yujun Fei, and his expression revealed slight dissatisfaction. Yujun Fei, I think you're getting weaker and weaker. A mere small dynasty's team is worthy of you being so worried. If you only have this little bit of ability, then in my opinion you might as well just give up. Fang Wenqing's face was filled with disdain. A large dynasty was a large dynasty, and a true large dynasty's team wasn't something an ordinary team could compare to. This group of cultivators from the Tiangang dynasty could only compare to some slightly weaker large dynasty's teams, and it wasn't at their level. Yujun Fei looked coldly at Fang Wenqing, and the coldness in his voice deepened. Fang Wenqing, I haven't seen you for a while and you've become more arrogant. You think you're worthy of making me leave? As soon as these words were spoken, Fang Wenqing and Yujun Fei's aura erupted. The Azure Forest Dynasty and Cloud Sword Dynasty had always had enmity between them, and the accumulated enmity over the years wasn't something that could be easily resolved. Not to mention the friction between the dynasties, every test competition was a place for them to compete. Thus, from the moment they participated in the test competition, they were already each other's enemies. Yo, from the looks of it, you want to train a bit. Fang Wenqing sneered, not fearing Yujun Fei's words at all. If the two of them really fought, it was not certain who would win. Seeing that the conflict between Fang Wenqing and Yujun Fei was getting deeper and deeper, Cheng Hifeng couldn't help but say, the most important thing now is the Wind Spirit Tiger. Don't waste time on other things. We will be able to determine who will be able to snatch the Wind Spirit Tiger later. Following Cheng Hifeng's words, Yujun Fei and Fang Wenqing glanced at each other and coldly snorted. Then they turned around, unwilling to say another word to each other. Many cultivators present saw this scene. The conflict between the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty was really getting more and more intense. If it wasn't for the Wind Spirit Tiger, the two of them would have already started fighting. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze landed on Cheng Hifeng. Just as Mo Yunjue had said, this Cheng Hifeng was a smiling tiger. Chapter 15-18. The conflict between the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty was undoubtedly evident from this matter alone. Cheng Hifeng's actions earlier were clearly to intensify the conflict between the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty. She thought about it carefully and understood Cheng Hifeng's plan. Once the conflict between the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty was planned, then the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty would definitely not give way when it came to snatching the Wind Spirit Tiger. Moreover, the Big Dipper Dynasty became the reason for their conflict, so they would also pay attention to the Big Dipper Dynasty when fighting. In this way, the Martial Dynasty would very likely be ignored, and the possibility of them obtaining the Wind Spirit Tiger would be higher. That's really a good move. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a cold light. The Martial Dynasty really lived up to their nickname of the Smiling Tiger. They had only met once, but she had already sensed it. Even when she looked at Cheng Hifeng even showed her a bright and kind smile. The Smiling Tiger had always been extremely dangerous. Once you got in contact with it, you would know what it meant to hide a knife behind a smile. Mo Yunjue stood beside Bailey Hongzhuang, his handsome face calm and indifferent. The cultivators of the Azure Forest Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty may seem impulsive, but they are not stupid. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but glance at Mo Yunjue and immediately understood what Mo Yunjue meant. However, any cultivator who could participate in the assessment competition was not simple, and the cultivators chosen by the large empire would not be stupid other than having strong strength. It would not be easy for Cheng Hifeng to use others. It seemed that this was really a fierce battle. All the cultivators present fell into silence. Each of them found a piece of land that belonged to them and sat down to rest. Obviously, it would take some time for the wind spirit tiger to give birth to a cub. During this time, what they needed to do was to conserve their energy and be prepared to fight at any time. Almost all the cultivators had a trace of vigilance as they looked at all the cultivators around them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also sat down. They had been running around for a long time today. Now that they still had time, they needed to adjust their state of mind. Originally, with their strength, there was no guarantee that they would be able to obtain the wind spirit tiger cub. If they did not adjust their condition, the possibility of success would be even smaller. Baisher, how many cubs will this wind spirit tiger give birth to? Xiao He curiously sat next to the white lion. Clearly, the white lion knew more about the situation of the demonic beast than she and Xiao He. Xia Jiqing and the others also looked at Baisher curiously. They only knew how strong the wind spirit tiger was, but they didn't know how many cubs it could give birth to at a time. If possible, they naturally hoped that the wind spirit tiger could give birth to as many cubs as possible. White Lion scanned the cave and said slowly, "There should be 3 of them." The reproduction ability of demonic beasts was also different. The lower the level of the demonic beast, the stronger its reproduction ability. This was also the reason why people often saw low-level demonic beasts. The higher the level of the demonic beast, the weaker its reproduction ability. Demonic beasts like the wind spirit tiger could only have about 3 cubs at a time. As for the higher level ones, there may only be 2 or even 1. Chapter 15:19. There are 3 wind spirit tiger cubs. This is already much better than what I had imagined. Dongfang Yu's face was filled with a spring breeze smile. He originally thought that there was only 1 wind spirit tiger, but now that there were 3, it was already a pleasant surprise. Gong Xiaoqing and the rest nodded slightly. With 3 wind spirit tigers, this meant that the possibility of getting one was much higher. It's a pity that there are too many wolves and too little meat. Yuan Jixin sighed helplessly. This kind of thing would always attract the attention of many cultivators, so this kind of situation was also expected. It's already not easy for us to have the chance to meet them. How difficult would it be to get a contract beast normally? Bai Junyu smiled. No matter what, they had at least a chance in front of them. Normally, if they wanted to get a contract beast, the competition would be much more terrifying than now. Speaking of which, their luck was already much better than the average cultivator. It was very difficult for an average cultivator to find a sealing master who could seal a demonic beast, but they had a ready-made sealing master right beside them. As long as they could get a wind spirit tiger cub, it meant that they would get a contract beast. How fortunate would that be? Hearing Bai Junyu's words, a smile appeared on everyone's face. Indeed, if they did not come here today, they would not even have the chance to see this scene. From the start of the assessment until now, their luck was already very good. How many cultivators did not have their luck? After the wind spirit tiger gives birth to its cubs, what should we do? Gong Xiaoqing's dark and cold eyes were filled with seriousness. With so many competitors in front of them, if they did not prepare well, then it was very likely that all their efforts would be in vain. Everyone sat down and formed a circle. Their minds were all thinking about what to do. The wind spirit tiger knows that there is danger outside. After it gives birth to its cubs, it will definitely not walk out of the cave. As such, the cultivators from each dynasty will definitely take action and think of a way to chase the wind spirit tiger out. Because everyone does not understand the situation inside the cave. If we just go in like this, then only death awaits. Mo Yunjue's deep and mesmerizing eyes were filled with seriousness and wisdom. They had to come up with a plan of action in advance. Once these cultivators attack the wind spirit tigers, there will definitely be many cultivators who want to take advantage of the chaos and sneak into the cave to steal the cubs. Faced with such a situation, I feel that the large empire's teams will form an alliance to prevent other cultivators from taking advantage of the situation. Bailey Hongzhuang continued. None of the people present were fools. Even if there had always been grudges between the cultivators of the Azure Forest dynasty and the Cloud Sword dynasty, it was impossible for them to erupt at the beginning. If it were her, she would definitely choose to form an alliance with them. Once all the other cultivators were eliminated, they would come back for the final battle. That's right. Mo Yunjue nodded. Once they join forces, it will be very disadvantageous for us. The strengths of the 3 great dynasties' teams were not weak. Once they joined forces, it could be said to be extremely difficult for them to break through the heavy encirclement. Xia Jiqing and the others couldn't help but frown. They didn't expect the situation to be so complicated. In that case, wouldn't they have no chance? Chapter 15:20. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue were guessing the plans of the 3 great empires, Yuan Jixing noticed that the cultivators of the three great empires were indeed whispering to each other. Although no one could clearly hear what they were talking about, they could tell that they were talking about cooperation just by looking at their posture. Does this mean that we don't have a chance? Yuan Xiaoman's expression was ugly. They had finally come across such an opportunity and now they were told that they had no chance at all. This was too depressing. Mo Yunjue frowned. Once this alliance was formed, it would be extremely difficult for them to obtain a chance. Unless they could ally with other cultivators to deal with the three great empires. However, not to mention the difficulty of such an alliance, they did not have the conditions to do so. Now that they had 3 Wind Spirit Tiger Cubs, each of the 3 great empires could have 1 each. This way their alliance would be very solid. However, they did not have such conditions. Every team wanted to obtain a Wind Spirit Tiger, but if they were to ally with other teams to deal with the 3 great empires, they would not only need to find teams from the 3 great empires, but also teams from many other empires. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Mo Yunjue had already dismissed it. Gong Xiaoqing and the rest fell into silence. Under such circumstances, they really did not have any other ideas. They were simply too helpless. However, just as everyone was at a loss, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes gradually lit up. I have an idea. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, everyone's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang's body, and it was difficult to hide the curiosity on their faces. What idea? Feeling everyone's gaze on her, Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips parted slightly, and a sly look appeared on her delicate and dazzling face. I can think of a way to attract the other demonic beasts and create a big mess. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Gong Xiaoqing and the rest could not help but recall that Bailey Hongzhuang had used the same trick in the Luoyin mountain range. Thinking about it carefully, everyone's eyes became brighter. Indeed, this was really a way. Mo Yunjue looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to have such a way. It was really unexpected. Boss, once those demonic beasts come, they will attack the cultivators indiscriminately. Then the weaker cultivators will naturally have no chance, but the teams of the 3 great empires will still have a chance. Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with thought. The effect of this trick was indeed excellent, but part of the reason was that the mercenaries were not strong enough. Clearly, the strength of the cultivators from these 3 dynasties was not weak, and the variables were not small. Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to have already expected this. Her phoenix eyes, like a clear spring, did not have the slightest ripple, still calm and charming. I can make the demonic beasts focus their attention on the cultivators of the 3 dynasties. The other cultivators will also be attacked to a certain extent. In this way it will be much easier for us to fish in troubled waters. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into an enchanting smile. Fishing in troubled waters, she had always been very good at it. Chapter 1521. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's idea, everyone's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but change a bit, their expressions full of emotion. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the sudden change in everyone's expression and couldn't help but say, "Why are you all looking at me like this?" "Good. That's great." Xia Jiqing gave a thumbs up. The idea that the boss came up with really saved effort and increased the success rate. Originally, they had no way to break the seamless cooperation of the 3 dynasties. Now that boss had come up with this plan, all of the difficult situations seemed to have been easily resolved. Wonderful. This move is simply too ingenious. It's beyond everyone's expectations. Bai Junyu also gave a thumbs up. For this kind of trick that didn't leave any traces, it was simply created for such a situation. Boss, I really admire you a lot. Yuan Xiaoman gave a big thumbs up to Bailey Hongzhuang. If she encountered such a situation before, she would have given up her goal long ago. That was because it was an impossible task. Just looking at the strength of the large dynasties was enough to defeat all her hopes. However, since she was in the same team with the boss, her feelings had changed. Those things that were impossible before had now become possible. Those things that she didn't have the courage to try before had now become possible. Now she felt that as long as the boss was there, she would dare to do anything. This kind of thing that seemed impossible to succeed was not necessarily impossible after they did it. Thinking back to when they entered the monument, who would have thought that the boss would be able to get the final inheritance? However, the result was like this. The boss would always be an unsolvable existence. Seeing that everyone agreed with her plan, the smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's lips widened a bit. Since everyone feels that there is no problem, then we can start in a while. The dark as ink beautiful eyes bloomed with a dazzling brilliance. Bailey Hongzhuang had all kinds of poisonous powders and poisons in her Qingkuan bag. However, in this assessment, most of the fights were head-on, so it was difficult to directly subdue the opponent and feed them pills. Therefore, she still had a lot of things on her. Long before participating in the assessment, she already knew that this place was full of monsters, so she prepared a lot of things in this regard. As for how to sprinkle these on the other cultivators, this depended on the 3 beasts. Now that most of the teams in the assessment knew that they had 3 contract beasts in their team, this had caused many cultivators to be surprised. This was because the contract beasts were originally obtained by cultivators with extraordinary identities. The rank of the dynasty they were in was not high, and the possibility of having a contract beast was very small. However, such a team of cultivators from a medium-sized empire actually had 3 contracted beasts. This was something that was hard to believe in the first place. However, now that everyone knew about this matter, they no longer took it to heart. Compared to them, other cultivators would not care about these 3 beasts. Therefore, the possibility of the 3 beasts being discovered was very small. Master, when do we move? Chapter 1522. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around and said, "There's no need to rush now. Let's wait until the wind spirit tiger is about to give birth before we take action." Now everyone was biding their time. Once the wind spirit tiger's cubs were born, the cultivators from the other teams would no longer be able to hold back their anxiety and become restless. By then, the actions of the 3 beasts would not be so obvious. Moreover, the effect of the powder was very fast. If they used it too early before the cubs were born, the group of beasts would have already rushed over. Then wouldn't their chances be wiped out? Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the 3 beasts did not object and waited for orders. In their eyes, their master's orders were never a problem. They only needed to wait for their master's orders. After coming up with a solution, the cultivators from the Tiangang dynasty calmed down. Regardless of whether the final result was successful or not, at least their current arrangement seemed feasible. As time passed, the atmosphere became more and more tense. 2 more teams of cultivators rushed over from afar. However, when everyone saw the newcomers, they only glanced at them briefly and did not pay much attention to them. Now that there were so many teams from the Tiangang dynasty present, they were not in the mood to care about anything else. The process of giving birth is really slow. Until now, the cubs have not been born. I'm afraid we have to wait for a while. The wind spirit tiger already knows that it is surrounded. I'm sure it's thinking of a way now. It's not in the mood to give birth. After it gives birth, we will take action. I've checked and there are no other beasts nearby. As long as we get rid of the mother wind spirit tiger, we can snatch the cubs. Some of the cultivators could not help but start talking. The thought of having a wind spirit tiger as a contract beast made them excited. After hearing the cultivators' conversation, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but feel sorry for the wind spirit tiger. This wind spirit tiger was really pitiful. Its cubs were discovered by everyone. Not only would it not be able to keep the cubs, but it would also lose its own life. Generally speaking, even a wind spirit tiger would not take so long to give birth. If she guessed correctly, the wind spirit tiger was stalling for time. It knew very well that once the cub was born, it would face a disaster. Therefore, it was desperately stalling for time. Unfortunately, the situation before him was already unsolvable. No matter how he stalled for time, the final result would not change. I suddenly feel that this wind spirit tiger is so pitiful. Xia Jiqing faintly sighed. At this time, the wind spirit tiger was already a mother. Thinking that there were so many cultivators outside who wanted to steal its child, the wind spirit tiger must be feeling extremely pained. Listening to Xia Jiqing's words, Yuan Xiaoman also nodded. I think so too. It has been staying inside and not daring to come out. I suddenly feel that we are very cruel. Speaking of which, the wind spirit tiger did not take the initiative to attack them. It was just that it was unlucky and was discovered by other cultivators when it was giving birth. That was why it ended up like this. Chapter 1523. In fact, it is also a good thing that we can sign a contract with a beast. Maybe it will have a better development. Dong Fengyu blinked his charming peach blossom eyes and hugged Baisher. Baisher, what do you think of following Hongzhuang? Baisher was slightly stunned and then said without hesitation, following the master is the best. Following the master is the best. Xiao He and Xiao Bai also narrowed their eyes and spoke with a happy expression. Looking at the 3 beasts, the smile in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes spread a little. She was able to contract with Baisher and the others. She also felt that it was a gift from the heavens. After Xia Jiqing and Yuan Xiaoman heard the answer of the 3 beasts, the worry in their eyes dissipated. In fact, most cultivators would be very concerned about their contract beasts. This was because the contract beasts were their most trusted partners. What's more, every cultivator only had one chance in their life to contract with a monster beast, so everyone would cherish it. No one would be stupid enough to hurt their own contract beast. Therefore, most of the contract beasts got along very well with human cultivators. I don't think the situation of the three cubs is a big deal. Even if they stay in this small world, it is likely that they will be killed by other cultivators in the future. If they contract with human cultivators, the strength of the cultivators present is not weak. I think that their future will not be bad. The only thing that makes people feel pity is the mother wind spirit tiger. I am afraid that she will die here today. Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with unbearable light. They wanted to contract with the cubs, but they had to kill the mother before that. This was a bit cruel. Gong Shaoqing and the others looked at each other. If they really contracted with the wind spirit tiger cubs, then this practice was indeed a bit unkind. I am afraid that this situation is inevitable. There are so many cultivators present. Even if we don't do it, the other cultivators will. What's more, if we don't do this, the wind spirit tiger will not give its children to us. Yuan Jixin's eyes flashed with a serious light. He was telling the truth. Many situations were unavoidable. Xia Jiqing sighed faintly. She also knew that her idea was somewhat whimsical. However, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. It's not impossible to change as long as we don't become the bad guys. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Xia Jiqing and Yuan Xiaoman both looked at Bailey Hongzhuang curiously. They didn't know what Bailey Hongzhuang was talking about. Boss, do you have an idea? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. In fact, she could understand Xia Jiqing's thoughts just like her own. With her relationship with White Lion, if she met White Lion's mother, she would definitely not be ruthless to White Lion's mother. It was the same for Xiao He and Xiao Bai. If he really did that, he would inevitably feel guilty when he interacted with his contracted beast in the future. She saw the White Lion crawl out of the demon beast egg with her own eyes. With a confused look on its face, it treated her as its mother. If she killed White Lion's mother, how could she not feel guilty in the face of such a White Lion? Later, the cultivators of the various dynasties will definitely find ways to force the mother wind spirit tiger out of the cave and kill it. Chapter 1524. After Bailey Hongzhuang finished explaining her plan, Yuan Xiaoman was completely convinced by Bailey Hongzhuang. They were all intelligent, but why was Boss's brain so much more brilliant than theirs? Faced with such a situation, they felt that there was no solution at all. However, Boss was always able to come up with a solution. This was too much of a blow to them. Boss, how did your brain develop? Yuan Xiaoman looked at Bailey Hongzhuang speechlessly. The two ideas that Boss came up with today had shocked her. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Think about it and you'll find a way. She had experienced many things in her previous life, and adding on to the things that she had experienced in this life, it was a total of 2 lifetimes. She had lived for more than 10 years than Yuan Xiaoman and the rest, so she naturally had more experience than Yuan Xiaoman and the rest. Otherwise, wouldn't she have lived for more than 10 years in vain? Mo Yunjue looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with admiration. Logically speaking, ordinary people would not know what to do when faced with such a situation. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was always calm in the face of change, and was able to think calmly every time. This was something that he truly admired. Moreover, he had never heard of such a method. What kind of powder could attract the demonic beast? And it could directly make the demonic beasts attack the other party. Most of the time, this kind of medicinal powder could play a very important role. Gong Shaoqing and the rest looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in admiration. This standard, this leadership, they really could not compare. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest spoke very softly. The surrounding cultivators could only see Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest talking, but they did not know what they were talking about. However, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others talking and laughing, and chatting in full swing, everyone's heart was a little curious. Logically speaking, in such a situation, the cultivators from the 3 great empires should have the absolute upper hand. Even the other 2 ordinary large empires teams did not look so good. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were quite strong, there was still a certain gap between them. However, under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still able to talk and laugh with confidence. This was somewhat hateful. After some discussion, Cheng Huffing and the others had already confirmed the alliance. There were a total of 5 teams from large empires present. However, in their opinion, it was enough for the cultivators from their 3 empires to join forces. Ordinary cultivators were no match for them, so there was no need for them to find allies. After discussing the cooperation, Fang Wenqing and the others also noticed that Xia Jiqing and the others were chatting happily. They only felt that it was particularly dazzling. This was simply looking down on them. Take a look at the cultivators of the other teams. Which one of them wasn't on alert and on guard against the teams of the three great dynasties at all times? However, the Great Dipper dynasty's cultivators dared to be so nonchalant. This was simply a provocation. I used to hear that the cultivators of the Great Dipper dynasty were quite arrogant. Today it seems that this rumor is really true. Fang Wenqing's eyes were filled with displeasure. He hated people who dared to put on airs in front of him, just like Yu Junfei. Hearing this, Qing Hufeng and Yu Junfei's eyes also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Chapter 1525. However, if it were them, they would not care too much about such a situation. However, Fang Wenqing had always been a narrow-minded person. In his eyes, such a matter was not so easy to solve. In the next moment, Fang Wenqing stood up directly. A loud and arrogant voice came out of his mouth, clearly and loudly entering the ears of every cultivator present. The Wind Spirit Tiger's cub has already been taken by our three dynasties. If you don't want to die, leave now. Fang Wenqing's voice was overbearing and firm, not giving anyone a chance to refute. He believed that with the strength of their three dynasties, no one would dare to challenge them directly. In order to avoid the situation of fishing in troubled waters, it was better to get rid of these guys now. In this way, the next competition would only be between the three dynasties. As Fang Wenqing's voice fell, the cultivators present were all stunned for a moment, and their faces suddenly became ugly. This Azure Forest dynasty's cultivator is too overbearing. He actually wants to drive us away and not give us any chance. Yeah, it's not easy to come across such an opportunity. Why should we just give up like this? It's not a big deal if we really can't get anything in the end. However, just based on his words, he wants us to leave like this. This is too much of a bully. Almost at the same time, all the cultivators present had a dissatisfied look on their faces. With such a great opportunity, no one would be willing to give it up like this. I didn't expect the Azure Forest dynasty to be so arrogant and overbearing, especially the person who spoke. Just looking at his appearance, it gives people a very unpleasant feeling. Xia Jiqing looked at Fang Wenqing with dissatisfaction. For this kind of guy, it had always been annoying. Mo Yunjue glanced at Fang Wenqing and said, "That's Fang Wenqing, the leader of the Azure Forest dynasty. His temper is fiery and arrogant. He has never been popular, but his strength is very strong." Hearing this, everyone looked at Mo Yunjue in surprise. They did not expect Mo Yunjue to know so much information. It was really unexpected. Not to mention being able to determine the identities of the three great dynasties with a single glance earlier, he was actually even able to clearly understand the name and character of the leader of the Azure Forest dynasty, and this wasn't ordinary. In fact, along the way, Mo Yunjue was the one who told them a lot of things that they didn't know. Now, everyone felt that Mo Yunjue was their information database. If they didn't understand anything, they just had to ask Mo Yunjue and he would definitely get the answer. Feeling everyone's surprised and shocked gazes, Mo Yunjue smiled faintly and said, "I have a photographic memory, so I remember everything I see." Everyone nodded in agreement. They could only gasp in amazement at Mo Yunjue's ability. Bailey Hongzhuang's deep phoenix eyes were filled with a trace of cold light. Her expression was slightly heavy. Originally, they still had a chance to fish in troubled waters, but Fang Wenqing and the others suddenly made such a move, which made the situation much more complicated. In fact, it wasn't that she couldn't understand Fang Wenqing's actions. This was undoubtedly extremely beneficial to them. What should we do now? Chapter 1526. Don't be impatient. Mo Yunjue's expression was calmer as he quietly observed the situation of the surrounding cultivators. No cultivator would give up such a good opportunity. It will be very difficult for Fang Wenqing to chase everyone away. Bailey Hongzhuang observed the surrounding cultivators. Just as Mo Yunjue had said, most of the cultivators continued to sit in their own territories and pretended that they did not hear Fang Wenqing's words. When Fang Wenqing saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' expressions change, a smug look appeared in his eyes. This was the result he wanted. However, when Fang Wenqing saw that the other cultivators did not show any signs of moving, his expression turned ugly again. "Did you not hear what I said?" Fang Wenqing raised his voice as his sharp and displeased gaze swept across the crowd of cultivators present. What a joke. This group of damn people actually dared to treat his words as wind. This was simply intolerable. Sensing the rising anger in Fang Wenqing's voice, the cultivators still pretended that they did not hear it. As long as no one left, they would definitely not leave. Facing the group of cultivators who did not move, the anger in Fang Wenqing's eyes had reached its peak. In the next moment, Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei both stood up. Now that they had formed an alliance, if everyone did not listen to Fang Wenqing, it was equivalent to not listening to them. This was absolutely intolerable. Looks like you don't understand human language? The murderous look in Fang Wenqing's eyes deepened. He turned around and glanced at Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei. At this point, if they still did not take action, it would be equivalent to being seen as a joke. Yu Junfei's voice rang out. The cultivators who have left now are still able to come out unscathed. If they wait for us to start moving, casualties will be unavoidable. Yu Junfei's voice was not filled with anger like Fang Wenqing's. However, the viciousness in his voice was even more threatening. After seeing that the cultivators from the three dynasties were about to take action, the expressions of the cultivators present became extremely ugly. They were unwilling to leave just like that. However, if they didn't leave once the three great empires attacked, only death would await them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others continued to sit quietly. No matter what, they could not leave just like that. The entire area was dead silent. Other than the voices of the cultivators from the three dynasties, there was no other sound. At this moment, a cultivator stood up with an indignant look on his face. Fang Wenqing, this small world doesn't belong to your three great dynasties. Since we're already here, everyone naturally has a chance. Why should we leave just because you tell us to? The man's voice was very loud. He even turned around to look at the other cultivators. Everyone, don't be afraid of them. We have quite a number of people. As long as we join forces, the three great empires won't be able to do anything to us. Hearing the man's words, all the cultivators present nodded one after another. Their originally nervous and flickering gazes immediately became firm. Just as the man had said, the number of cultivators from the three great dynasties was not as great as theirs. So what if they were stronger? Chapter 1527. However, just as the man finished speaking, Fang Wenqing's figure flew over. Before the man could even turn his head, the sharp blade had already pierced through the man's body. Bang! The man fell heavily to the ground. His eyes were wide open as if he could not believe what had just happened. However, the excruciating pain in his chest and the power that was gradually being withdrawn clearly reminded him that everything was real. Fang Wenqing swiftly withdrew his sharp sword and looked disdainfully at the man who had fallen to the ground. His tone was even more disdainful. You want to challenge me with such little ability? You're really digging your own grave. The courage that had just risen in everyone's hearts was instantly extinguished by Fang Wenqing's action. Part of the reason why Fang Wenqing attacked was because the man did not expect Fang Wenqing to attack so suddenly, which caught him off guard. However, they were able to sense Fang Wenqing's strength from the way he attacked. Based on their abilities, they obviously could not defeat Fang Wenqing. Moreover, although there were many cultivators present, no one knew if the alliance was reliable. The cultivators from the three great empires had obviously discussed for a period of time before deciding to form an alliance. However, they did not have the time to judge everything at all. If they insisted on staying and the other cultivators ran away, would they not become a thorn in the side of the three great empires? If that happened, the losses would outweigh the gains. For a moment, everyone fell into silence. No one dared to be the first to stand out. After all, the cultivator who had fallen earlier had proven the tragic outcome of being the first to stand out. They did not want to repeat the same mistake. When the cultivators from the three great empires saw the situation, the smiles in their eyes gradually deepened. As expected, the three great empires were famous for their prowess. Ordinary cultivators would not dare to cause trouble with them unless they were courting their own deaths. Now those who should leave can leave. Fang Wenqing crossed his arms in front of his chest. His face was filled with disdain and ridicule. If you don't leave now, I don't have that much patience. I'll have to send you to hell one by one. Fang Wenqing's gaze swept across the crowd of cultivators. He enjoyed this kind of pleasure the most. With a simple sentence, the cultivators did not dare to show any emotion. This was the influence of a powerful person's words. As soon as he said that, there was a commotion among the cultivators present. Their eyes kept darting between the three great empires and the cave. They only hated that the wind spirit tiger could not give birth to its cubs immediately. If that happened, perhaps they would have other chances. However, there was still no movement from the cave. It was obvious that they would not come out anytime soon. I'll give you 3 more seconds. If you don't leave, I'll have to do it myself. The sharpness in Fang Wenqing's eyes became more and more intense. These fellows really wouldn't give up until all hope was gone. He had already said so much, yet these cultivators were still trying to stall for time and wait for an opportunity. However, he would not let them have such an opportunity. 3. Fang Wenqing's voice was not fast. His gaze was still sizing up everyone. 2. Fang Wenqing slowly took out his weapon. Chapter 1528. Damn it, the cultivators of the Azure Forest dynasty are really a group of lunatics. They act like they are the king of the heavens. It's really hateful. There's no other way. Who let them be stronger than us? Now we can only swallow our anger. If I am strong enough, I will definitely beat this Fang Wenqing down and make him lick my shoes. This guy is asking for a beating. Everyone's eyes flashed with a strong anger, but they did not dare to say anything in the current situation. It was all because they were not strong enough. They could only swallow their anger. Some cultivators of the medium-sized empires had begun to get up and leave. With their strength, not to mention facing the 3 empires, even if they were to face a dynasty, they would not have the slightest chance. Therefore, under Fang Wenqing's tyranny, they could only choose to leave. With the departure of the first team, the other teams with similar strength also got up and left. Seeing this scene, the cultivators of the 3 empires all had a touch of excitement on their faces. This was the strength of their team. The other cultivators could only stand aside obediently. As for wanting to fish in troubled waters and take away what they wanted, it was simply a fool's dream. These 3 empires are really shameless. What should we do? Xia Jiqing's face was filled with anxiety. If they left like this, it was obviously not in line with their style. But if they did not act, once the cultivators of the other empires left, the cultivators of the 3 empires would join forces to deal with them. Their situation would be even worse. Those who left are only those who are not strong enough. There are many ambitious cultivators who are not willing to leave. Gong Shaoqing slowly said. Just from the expressions of these cultivators, it could be judged that they did not intend to leave at all. Listening to Gong Shaoqing's words, Xia Jiqing once again looked at the surrounding cultivators. Sure enough, just as Gong Shaoqing said, the teams that left were all very weak. As for some of the teams that were not weak, they still stayed in place and did not have the intention to leave. It's better for these people to leave first. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue looked at each other. Both of their eyes revealed a trace of understanding. It seemed that the 2 of them were thinking the same thing. The cultivators who have left now are all people with weak willpower. Even if we want to form an alliance, we can't form one with them. Otherwise, not only will they not be of any help, their departure will also greatly affect our morale. Mo Yunjue's voice was calm and indifferent. Once an alliance was formed, morale was extremely important. Once someone in the alliance decided to retreat, the rest of the cultivators would leave as well. Then they would be utterly defeated. As long as they waited for a while longer, the remaining cultivators were more determined and had a certain level of strength. Only then would they be able to trust each other. With Mo Yunjue's words falling, Xia Jiqing and the others understood. They were wondering why Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue were not worried at all when things had already developed to this stage. It turned out that they had already planned everything out. Thinking of this, Xia Jiqing's original worry also dissipated a bit. With Boss and Mo Yunjue as the backbone, she really didn't need to worry so much. Chapter 1529. Seeing that the group of cultivators had left, the remaining cultivators remained where they were and did not show any signs of leaving. Seeing this scene, the complacent smile on Fang Wenqing's face dissipated a little. It seemed that the beating he had given earlier had not made these cultivators realize that they were not worthy of his attention. Are you going to challenge us? Fang Wenqing looked coldly at the cultivators present. He was extremely displeased with these people who dared to disobey him. However, the remaining cultivators were still sitting there without moving. They had no intention of leaving at all. The strength of the 3 great dynasties was indeed very impressive, but they were also not easily intimidated. If they left just because of Fang Wenqing's words, it would be too embarrassing. In the next moment, Yu Junfei's voice was slowly heard. I'll give you one more chance. We know very well which empire you're from. If you don't leave now, the 3 empires will definitely take your life if we meet you in the future. You have to think about this yourself. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of all the cultivators present changed slightly. This was an order to kill them. They did not care much about a head-on conflict, but they did not expect the 3 empires to be so ruthless. As such, it would take some courage to stay where they were. Among the cultivators present, some of them hesitated again after hearing this. The wind spirit tiger cub was very attractive to them. However, if they were hunted down by the three empires because of it, the price was not something that ordinary people could afford. Now that they were already in the center of the small world, the possibility of them meeting each other was very high. If the three empires wanted to hunt them down, they would definitely meet them in the coming days. They had to be careful. However, even in the face of the threat from the three empires, there were still some fearless people who did not care. At the very least, the teams from the other two large empires had no intention of leaving. The alliance of the three empires seemed to be very powerful, but the conflict between the Azure Forest Empire and the Cloud Sword Empire was well known. If it was not for the famous martial empire in the middle, they would not have formed an alliance at all. Once the matter of the Wind Spirit Tiger was over, the three dynasties would not be able to join forces to kill them. At best, they would only be a single dynasty team. They were similarly from a large empire. Even though their strengths were slightly inferior to the three great empires, if they were to leave just like this, then they would truly lose all face. This matter would definitely spread to everyone in a short period of time, and they didn't want to become a joke in everyone's eyes. All of a sudden, another three groups left. However, there were still a few groups that remained firmly where they were and showed no signs of leaving. Seeing this scene, Fang Wenqing and the others looked at each other. The remaining cultivators were a group of tough bones. It would not be easy to get rid of them. Looks like you really want us to do it ourselves? Fang Wenqing's voice was filled with coldness and viciousness. Many people would not give up until they reached the Yellow River. He wanted to let these people know how stupid their actions were. Chapter 1530. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the cultivators present. After noticing the firm look of everyone, she understood that they could form an alliance. However, just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to form an alliance with the cultivators, her name was suddenly shouted. Tiangang Dynasty, Bailey Hongzhuang. Fang Wenqing muttered Bailey Hongzhuang's name. The smile on his face was a little sinister. In that case, I'll use you as an example. As soon as these words came out, the faces of the cultivators of the Tiangang Dynasty became gloomy. This Fang Wenqing didn't choose anyone else but chose them. This was completely looking down on them. Fuck, who the hell is this Fang Wenqing? He's so arrogant. Bai Junyu's face was full of anger. Usually when choosing people he would choose the weakest cultivator. Fang Wenqing had chosen them now. Didn't this mean that in Fang Wenqing's eyes, they were the weakest? Damn, I've been unhappy with this guy for a long time. If there's a chance, I must step on his face and crush it. Xia Jiqing clenched her hands into fists. From the beginning until now, her heart had been full of anger. Getting rid of this annoying guy was tantamount to enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. The eyes of the cultivators present were also twisted on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. In their eyes, the Tiangang dynasty was a very special dynasty. From the beginning of the assessment until now, the Tiangang dynasty had always appeared in front of everyone as a dark horse. They just did not know what they would do now that the cultivators of the Azure Forest dynasty treated them like this. Fang Wenqing sneered at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. He was really curious about this so-called dark horse. The most important thing was that Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained the final inheritance of the monument. As everyone knew, the inheritance of the monument was not simple. Since Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained the final inheritance, there must be a treasure on her. As long as he killed Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, the treasure would undoubtedly fall into his hands. His strength was already very good. If he had the help of a treasure, he would definitely be able to reach a higher level. He was destined to be an outstanding cultivator in this assessment competition. Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei also looked at Fang Wenqing in surprise. They did not think that Fang Wenqing would choose Tiangang dynasty to attack first. Although they had never fought with the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty, they could tell that their strength was indeed not bad just by hearing the reputation of the Tiangang dynasty. However, on second thought, they quickly understood Fang Wenqing's thoughts. Fang Wenqing was interested in the treasures on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, they were also curious about the treasures on Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue looked at Fang Wenqing coldly. They were already unhappy with the former's high and mighty appearance. Bailey Hongzhuang did not even look at Fang Wenqing and directly turned her gaze to the other cultivators present. Since everyone chose not to leave, that means that we will not give up on this opportunity. Now the teams of the three dynasties have formed an alliance. Then why don't we form an alliance too? Chapter 1531. I am not suggesting an alliance because they want to attack me. In reality, no matter which team is chosen, we will attack them. The three great empires have never had the final say here. As long as we join forces, they will not be able to do anything to us. As for who the Wind Spirit Tiger's cub ends up in, that is everyone's business. Our alliance will only be against the three great empires, how about that? Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze swept across the crowd of cultivators. She had originally intended to form an alliance, but she did not expect the other party to pick them. After hearing the words of Bailey Hongzhuang, the expressions of the cultivators present changed a bit. Just like what Bailey Hongzhuang had said, they too had the intention to form an alliance. Because forming an alliance was the only way now. They instinctively felt that Bailey Hongzhuang must have said such words because she had been chosen. However, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's calm expression, they felt that this might not be the case. When Fang Wenqing saw that Bailey Hongzhuang still had the guts to call for an alliance under such circumstances, his expression turned even uglier. Bailey Hongzhuang really did not take him seriously. In the next moment, Fang Wenqing's figure moved and directly attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's ears twitched. She knew that Fang Wenqing had already attacked. However, she remained rooted to the ground and did not move an inch. Ding! Fang Wenqing's sneak attack this time was not as effective as the previous one. This was because Mo Yunjue had been standing beside Bailey Hongzhuang the entire time. Long before this, they had already planned everything. Fang Wenqing could not help but frown when his attack was blocked. Even though it was just a simple collision, he realized that Mo Yunjue was very powerful. In fact, he was not weaker than him. After realizing this, Fang Wenqing's expression changed. This was simply unbelievable. There was actually a cultivator in Tiangang Dynasty's team who was on par with him. Even if everyone said that the cultivators of Tiangang sect were not weak, this kind of strength seemed to be a little too strong. When the cultivators saw that Fang Wenqing's attack was ineffective, they all smiled. Let us form an alliance. A cultivator spoke first. The cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty were not weak. There was no harm in forming an alliance with them. Let's form an alliance too. We'll join too. After the first cultivator expressed his opinion, the rest of the people also expressed their opinions. Given the current situation, this was their only choice. After seeing everyone agree to form an alliance, the smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's face widened a bit. It seemed that forming an alliance was easier than she had expected. The cultivators from the Wu Empire and Cloud Sword Empire couldn't help but turn serious when they saw this. Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei both stood beside Fang Wenqing. What they didn't want to see the most was everyone joining forces. Because once they joined forces, it would be very difficult for them to defeat them one by one. Are you sure you want to be enemies with the three empires? Yu Junfei's expression was gloomy and his voice was filled with threat. However, just as Yu Junfei finished speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice rang out again. Chapter 1532. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang's words came out, the cultivators present all nodded. Bailey Hongzhuang's proposal was tantamount to solving the last worry in their hearts, and they no longer had any worries. Yu Junfei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang fiercely. It seemed that he had really underestimated Bailey Hongzhuang. He did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such means. Since you don't know what's good for you, then we can only make a move. Yu Junfei's voice was cold. At this point, there was no use in saying anything else. The only thing they could do was to make a move. If you have the ability, then make a move. In the end, we still don't know who will win and who will lose. Xia Zhiqing's disdainful voice rang out. She had been watching how the three dynasties' teams were clamoring, and now it was finally time for them to fight back. Yes, what's so great about the three dynasties? What's so great about them? Laozi has been unhappy with you for a long time. Another cultivator followed up. That's right, only you can form an alliance, but we can't. How can there be such a good thing? Under the oppression of the three great dynasties earlier, everyone had already accumulated a stomach full of vitality long ago. Now that they had the capital to compete, they naturally had to say a few words. Seeing this, the anger in Fang Wenqing's eyes became deeper and deeper. Why are you talking so much nonsense with them? Let's make a move. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others took out their weapons. Obviously, they were ready to fight at any time. In such a situation, the actions of the three beasts were not noticeable. When they returned to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, their task had already been completed. Done. Baisher waved his little paws, his face full of a proud smile. With his and Xiao Hei's perception, They had already noticed that the wind spirit tiger was about to give birth to a cub. Therefore they had already informed their master before this. With such a situation their actions were not noticed at all. As the two alliances really confronted each other, the faces of Yu Junfei and the others were a bit ugly. The other party had a lot more people than them. Although they were full of confidence in themselves, once the fight started, it wouldn't end in a short time. When the wind spirit tiger came out, their combat power would be greatly reduced. As a result, the situation wasn't optimistic either. What they hoped for the most was to scare all of these cultivators away. However, once these people joined forces, they did not know what to do. Didn't you want to fight? Do it. The group of cultivators also saw the state of the three empires and immediately mocked them mercilessly. Just a moment ago you were still acting like you're very impressive. Why are you acting like a coward now? What three great dynasties? He only knows how to shout. His true strength is nothing much. Everyone mocked. They also wanted to let the cultivators of the three great dynasties have a taste of their own medicine. Do you really think I don't dare to do anything to you? Fang Wenqing said angrily. Stop dilly-dallying. Do it if you can. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled charmingly. Fang Wenqing was a fool who was brave but not smart. He thought that he was some kind of hero, but in reality he was just a stupid pig. Chapter 1533. However, just as the two parties were about to engage in battle, a commotion suddenly broke out from the quiet cave. Sensing the commotion, the crowd's eyes turned towards the cave and they could no longer be bothered with the battle before them. Once the wind spirit tiger has given birth, it would be time for them to snatch the cubs. In contrast to the crowd's shock, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest appeared to be very calm. After White Lion's reminder, they had already understood the situation. Roar! A tender roar rang out from within the cave. Hearing this tender roar, the eyes of all the cultivators present lit up. The cub had been born. Fang Wenqing, Qing Hufeng, Yu Junfei and the rest looked at each other and immediately decided on their next course of action. They needed to first get the mother wind spirit tiger out of the cave and get rid of it before taking the cubs away. Thinking of this, Fang Wenqing and the rest shot a resentful glare at Bailey Hongzhuang before charging towards the cave. Once the cultivators knew that the cultivators from the three great empires had no time to pay attention to them, they all rushed towards the cave. Similarly, they would not miss this opportunity. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others stayed where they were and did not move. Leader, when will those beasts appear? Yuan Xiaoman asked curiously as she looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. The three beasts' movements had been very discreet, and in order to not arouse suspicion, she had not paid attention to their movements. Now she was very curious about the final outcome. If the powder could not attract the other beasts, it would be extremely difficult for them to snatch the cubs away. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around and said, "They should be back very soon. Let's wait here for a while and stay in the vicinity. Don't let the other cultivators notice anything amiss." Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the crowd nodded as they had an idea. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest had also appeared near the cave, but they were not in a hurry to approach it. The cultivators from the three great empires could no longer hold themselves back and immediately began to attack the cave. As long as they could get rid of the mother wind spirit tiger, all their problems would be solved. However, the path to the cave was not wide, so they could not enter together. If they went in one by one, they would definitely die at the hands of the wind spirit tiger. Therefore, their only option was to force the wind spirit tiger out. Bang! Boom! Attacks were launched one after another as everyone attacked the cave mercilessly. Even if the wind spirit tiger did not come out immediately, it would have to come out before they destroyed the cave. Roar! The wind spirit tiger also roared. Everyone felt as if their ears were about to be deafened by this roar. However, the group of cultivators remained unmoved and continued to attack the cave. Finally, under such circumstances, the female wind spirit tiger appeared in front of everyone. The wind spirit tiger's eyes were filled with ferocity as it glared at the cultivators. These despicable bastards. The wind spirit tiger is out. Kill it. Fang Wenqing's eyes were fierce. As long as they killed this wind spirit tiger, they would have succeeded. When he thought of having a wind spirit tiger as his contract beast, he couldn't help but feel happy. Chapter 1534. The three dynasties all sent some cultivators to block the entrance of the cave. They could not let other cultivators have a chance to fish in troubled waters. The situation of the cultivators in the other teams was the same. Some of the cultivators went to deal with the wind spirit tiger, while the other cultivators appeared at the entrance of the cave to fight with the other cultivators. Now was an excellent opportunity. Whoever could take the wind spirit tiger cub just had to run away directly. After seeing the battle break out in an instant, the cultivators of Tiangang's sect couldn't help but look around. Why hadn't the monsters come yet? If they didn't appear once the wind spirit tiger was killed by them, then they would have no chance. Xia Jiqing and the others couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. They knew that the boss had never made a mistake, but they didn't know if there would be any unexpected situation at this time. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes narrowed slightly. It was reasonable to say that the effect should have already begun, so there shouldn't be any problems. Took the wrong powder? The powder failed? This series of problems would not appear on her body. She believed that there would be some movement soon. Mo Yunjue also looked around curiously. He was really curious about the effect of Hongzhuang's powder. He wanted to know what the effect was. It had to be said that many times, the things that Hongzhuang took out would give people an indescribable sense of novelty. Over the years he had experienced and seen a lot of things. Ordinary people could not surprise him at all. However, Hongzhuang could surprise him again and again. It was really interesting. A group of cultivators was fighting with the wind spirit tiger. The strength of the wind spirit tiger was very strong. With so many cultivators besieging it, it had not shown any signs of defeat. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked carefully, they knew that the wind spirit tiger could not hold on for long. After all, it had just given birth and its combat power could not be compared to before. Hongzhuang, don't tell me your powder has no effect? Seeing that the monsters had not appeared, Bai Junyu could not help but ask. Just like that they kept waiting here. They really didn't know what would happen in the end. Feeling everyone's slightly suspicious eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows wrinkled slightly. There shouldn't be such a situation. Everyone felt helpless. If it was really useless, then they would have to rethink their plans. However, in the next moment, White Lion's voice rang out. He's here? You came? What's coming? Everyone looked at White Lion in confusion, not understanding what White Lion meant. However, they quickly understood. Other than the demonic beasts, what else could it be? Boom, boom, boom. Xia Jiqing and the others only felt the ground tremble as if there was an earthquake. A group of monster beasts rushed over, and just listening to this momentum made them feel terrified. After seeing the scene in front of them clearly, everyone was completely dumbfounded. Oh my god, boss is too fierce. Xia Jiqing opened her mouth wide and couldn't help but sigh. In their line of sight, dozens of monster beasts rushed over, and the surrounding trees had been directly crushed. This situation was somewhat similar to the demonic beast tide that they had seen in the Falling Cloud mountain range. Chapter 1535. Gong Shaoqing and the rest were completely dumbfounded. They had seen Hongzhuang use this trick before, but it had not been on such a grand scale. Looking at the situation before them, Hongzhuang was able to attract as many beasts as she needed. Wasn't this a little too terrifying? Mo Yunjue also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. This effect was much stronger than he had imagined. Hongzhuang was really able to attract all these beasts. She was able to achieve this with just some medicinal powder. This was simply too shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang could sense that Mo Yunjue and the rest were looking at her strangely and could not help but explain. The cultivators from the previous time were not as powerful as this time. To be on the safe side, I would feel more assured if I attracted more beasts. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's perfectly normal explanation, Yuan Jixin and the rest were at a loss for words. This wasn't an ordinary insurance policy. With so many beasts, even if there were quite a number of cultivators present, it would definitely be enough. At this moment, Gong Shaoqing and the rest could not help but sympathize with Fang Wenqing and the rest. No matter what, one should never offend Bailey Hongzhuang. This was definitely a wise saying. Unfortunately, many cultivators did not know this and did not believe it either. Bai Shi, Xiao He and Xiao Bai looked at each other with complacent expressions. They only felt that the cultivators from the three great dynasties were simply too detestable, especially Fang Wenqing. Hence, when they had scattered the medicinal powder, they had paid extra attention to Fang Wenqing. They believed that Fang Wenqing would soon experience the feeling of being surrounded by beasts. They did not wish to see such a detestable person again. The cultivators who had been dealing with the wind spirit tiger suddenly felt a violent fluctuation behind them and could not help but turn around to look. When they took a closer look, the cultivators were completely dumbfounded. They stared at the scene before them in disbelief, wondering if they had seen wrongly. Heavens, what's going on? Why have so many beasts suddenly appeared? What should we do? What kind of demonic beast is this wind spirit tiger? Why are so many demonic beasts coming to help? Since when did the demonic beasts become so united? What should we do? This is really 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Everyone sighed one after another. Such a situation was completely beyond their understanding. In their eyes, there had never been any deep feelings between demonic beasts. What's more, these demonic beasts were not of the same race. Could this be a cross-race friendship? This was heaven-defying. Fang Wenqing stared blankly at the scene before him. Where did all these demonic beasts come from? It's impossible for something like this to happen. Yu Junfei also frowned. Originally, it was already a done deal that he would obtain the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub. Now that such a situation had occurred, a huge variable had appeared. The final result had become unpredictable. The smiling tiger of the martial dynasty, Qing Hufeng, couldn't smile after seeing this scene. With so many demonic beasts, once their combat power exploded, even with their strength, they might not be able to obtain victory. Moreover, there seemed to be more demonic beasts appearing behind them. Chapter 1536. A group of monster beasts rushed over like the wind. Regardless of the situation in front of them, they rushed towards Fang Wenqing and the others. Suddenly being besieged by so many monster beasts, even Fang Wenqing and the others were dumbfounded. Why are these monster beasts attacking us? I don't know, it feels like we are in big trouble. Yu Junfei's face was extremely ugly. This feeling was tantamount to a cooked duck flying away. However, in this situation what they needed to pay more attention to was not the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub, but whether they could even get out of here alive was a problem. Suddenly, the cultivators did not care about the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub at this moment, but all their attention was focused on the monster beasts rushing over. However, looking at the number of monster beasts gradually increasing, their faces became more and more ugly. They constantly fought with the monster beasts, trying to avoid the attacks of these monster beasts. However, these monster beasts seemed to have identified them and did not give them the slightest chance to escape. This group of monster beasts is simply crazy. Why must they attack us? Yeah, these demonic beasts seem to have taken us as their targets. If this continues, we'll be surrounded. Run. Otherwise we will lose our lives here. What about the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub? Now that we can't even keep our lives, how can we have the mood to care about the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub? Let's run. Some cultivators found that these monster beasts did not have the slightest sign of leaving, so they no longer continued to stay and rushed to the distance. If they continued to stay here, they would only have a road to death. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others found that this group of monster beasts had appeared, they directly hid in the distance, waiting to see a good show. When the other cultivators were driven away by the monster beasts, it was time for them to make a move. Xia Jiqing could not help but laugh. Boss, this move of yours is really amazing. Yuan Xiaoman's eyes could not hide the light of worship. Such a complicated situation, boss simply solved it without any effort. If Fang Wenqing and the others knew, I'm afraid they would be angry to death. Look carefully. Fang Wenqing is surrounded by the most demonic beast. Right now he can't even protect himself. Dongfang Yu chuckled. Hearing Dongfang Yu's words, everyone looked carefully and discovered that it was just as Dongfang Yu had said. Fang Wenqing had the most demonic beasts in front of him. The smile in everyone's eyes gradually deepened when they saw Fang Wenqing's face that was filled with anger but did not know what to do. Serves him right. That guy deserves to be punished like that. Bailey Hongzhuang observed the situation in front of her. The number of demonic beasts was indeed not small. Even though there were many cultivators present, the number of demonic beasts was more than enough to drive them away from this area. I believe these cultivators won't be able to hold on for long before leaving. It will be time for us to make our move. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with wisdom and calmness. She carefully observed the situation around her. In such a chaotic situation, it was still possible to fish in troubled waters. Fortunately, the 3 demonic beasts completed their mission beautifully. Every cultivator was sprinkled with medicinal powder, so none of the cultivators were able to dodge the attacks of the demonic beasts. Chapter 1537. Following the first cultivator's escape into the distance, many other cultivators began to flee as well. They could no longer endure the attacks of the monstrous beast. The monstrous beast's stamina was stronger than theirs. With so many monstrous beasts attacking at the same time, before they could finish off the first monstrous beast, the second monstrous beast had already appeared. As a result, they could not take it all in. They could only feel the origin energy in their bodies rapidly depleting. If this continued, only death awaited them. Hence, this was their only choice. Compared to other cultivators, the cultivators from the three dynasties had undoubtedly lasted longer. This was because their strength was not something that ordinary cultivators could compare to. Yu Junfei and Cheng Hufeng continued to kill the monstrous beasts in front of them. With their strength, they were not slow in dealing with the monstrous beasts. However, there were simply too many monstrous beasts. Hence, they could not finish them off in a short period of time. Why are these monstrous beasts attacking us like crazy? Yu Junfei's face was filled with confusion. He believed that everything happened for a reason. It was impossible for them to be attacked by these monstrous beasts for no reason. I don't know either. This situation is just too strange. Cheng Hufeng shook his head. No matter how he thought about it, he could not come to a conclusion. They had never encountered such a strange situation since the beginning of the assessment. It was equally strange if these monstrous beasts were here to save the wind spirit tiger. This was because monstrous beasts had never helped each other. As for the human factor, they did not dare to believe it. They simply could not think of anyone who could do this. Hence, they could only deal with these monstrous beasts in confusion. However, there are so many monstrous beasts. Even we can't hold on for long, Yu Junfei said helplessly. Cheng Hufeng's expression was also very ugly. If we can't hold on, we can only leave. Compared to Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei who were struggling, Fang Wenqing's situation was not as optimistic. He only felt that he could not hold on any longer. His mental energy was extremely tense. If he was not careful, he might be pounced on by the monstrous beasts. Facing so many monstrous beasts, once he was knocked to the ground, only death would await him. This situation is really strange. Fang Wenqing secretly spat. His eyes were filled with rage. However, no matter how unwilling he was, he could only choose to give up under such circumstances. I'll be leaving first. After Fang Wenqing said this, he turned into a rainbow light and rushed forward. He could no longer hold on here. Seeing Fang Wenqing leave, the cultivators from the Azure Forest dynasty followed him. They were also exhausted from dealing with the monstrous beasts. However, the monstrous beasts did not stop attacking. They chased after Fang Wenqing and the others. And beasts were as if they would not give up until they knew what was going on. Suddenly, the martial artists from the Martial and Cloud, who were bitingly. However, looking at their struggling appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could judge that they would not be able to hold on for long. Chapter 1538. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the others expected, the cultivators of the Martial Dynasty and the Cloud Sword Dynasty did not persist for long. Because the number of monsters was too large, there were already cultivators in the team who were injured. When being besieged like this, once they were injured, the injury would become more and more serious, and in the end they would only end up dying. Moreover, it was not only one cultivator who was in this situation. If they continued to stay here, the strength of their team would be greatly affected. The most important thing was that in the current situation, the possibility of them winning the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub was very small. Since they could not get the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub, this sacrifice had no meaning. Thinking of this, Yu Junfei made a prompt decision. Let's go. With Yu Junfei's voice falling, the cultivators of the Cloud Sword Dynasty were relieved. If they continued to stay here, they really did not know when they would die. In the next moment, the cultivators of the Cloud Sword Dynasty quickly left, and some of the monsters also chased after them. Of the original many teams, only the Martial Dynasty's team remained in place. Captain, we can't hold on any longer, why don't we leave together? A cultivator said. With so many monsters, he was already tired of dealing with them. Cheng Hifeng's face was very ugly and his eyes were gloomy. He always felt that the situation in front of him was strange. Could it be that someone was secretly harming them? He did not believe that the monsters would attack them for no reason. There must be an unknown reason for this. Damn it, he still couldn't figure out where the problem was. However, to let him leave like this, he was really unwilling. Ah! A scream sounded, and a cultivator of the Martial Dynasty died in the mouth of a monster. Seeing this scene, the cultivators of the Martial Dynasty also had the intention to retreat in their hearts. Captain, Cheng Hifeng's face was ugly and he waved his hand, let's go. In the blink of an eye, all the cultivators from the Martial Empire left one after another, and the group of demonic beasts followed behind them as they left. This cultivator from the Wu Dynasty is really unwilling to accept this. After the cultivators of the Wu Dynasty left, Xia Jiqing also slowly walked out. Bailey Hongzhuang looked in the direction of the martial dynasty. It seemed like the martial dynasty was still the strongest among the three dynasties. That Cheng Hifeng was obviously more scheming than Fang Wencheng and Yu Junfei, and also more intelligent. Then Cheng Hufeng must be suspecting that someone is plotting this. Gong Xiaoqing's face was filled with wisdom and astuteness. Just from Cheng Hifeng's doubtful and questioning gaze, he could guess what Cheng Hifeng was thinking. So what if he's suspicious? By the time he finds out, everything will have been settled. Bai Junyu smiled brilliantly. No one could do anything to them. In this short period of time, all the cultivators and demonic beasts present had left, leaving only their team. In his line of sight, the wind spirit tiger was still frozen in place, licking its wounds. With so many cultivators attacking it together, the wind spirit tiger had sustained many injuries and was obviously out of energy. Chapter 1539. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others slowly walked forward. The wind spirit tiger noticed the movements of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and suddenly roared. Roar! The wind spirit tiger struggled to stand up, its eyes fierce. Obviously, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others made a move, it would definitely rush forward. Looking at the wind spirit tiger like this, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also changed a bit. They could clearly see the injuries on the wind spirit tiger's body. The injuries were very serious, but it was still protecting its child. Roar! Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others getting closer, the wind spirit tiger roared again. However, from the sound, it could be heard that it was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. The wind spirit tiger quickly rushed in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It stretched out its claws and immediately wanted to pounce on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Roar! At this moment, another roar sounded. This roar was far more shocking than the wind spirit tiger's roar, and it was more shocking. Baisher jumped from Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder and stood in front of the wind spirit tiger. With the roar of Baisher, the wind spirit tiger's expression suddenly changed. Its body could not help but crawl down, looking at Baisher in fear. This was the power of the Beast King. Baisher was a little proud. These days, it had been following its master to cultivate in the desert world, but the guy there simply ignored it. Its dignity as a Beast King was being looked down upon in such a blatant manner. For this matter, Xiao He and Xiao Bai had laughed at it more than once. Today it finally had the chance to show off its power. Aside from the desert world, the godly might Beast King was still able to make demonic beasts submit to him. The wind spirit tiger looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in fear. It was simply unbelievable that it would see the Beast King here. Moreover, the Beast King had become a contract beast of humans? Then how strong were these humans? The wind spirit tiger did not dare to imagine. Bailey Hongzhuang turned her head and said to Xia Jiqing and the others, "You go and bring the wind spirit tiger cubs." Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing and the others nodded slightly and immediately walked into the cave. Before, they had been paying attention to the movements of the cave to ensure that no other cultivators had mixed in during this time. After a while, Xia Jiqing and the others came out with 3 wind spirit tiger cubs. These 3 cubs were still very young and did not know what was going on outside. After seeing the 3 cubs, the wind spirit tiger's eyes softened. By the way, the wind spirit tiger and the wind spirit tiger, she had to admit that it was a cruel to take its children like this. And take the cubs Hongzhuang. They Hongzhuang tiger. Were they not? They had Hongzhuang. And had Hongzhuang's end? Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked to the side of the wind spirit tiger. The wind spirit tiger's eyes were full of vigilance, but because of the majesty of the Beast King, it just stayed in the same place. Bailey Hongzhuang helped the wind spirit tiger check its wounds. The wind spirit tiger was already scarred from the previous fight. After feeling the goodwill of Bailey Hongzhuang, the wind spirit tiger's tense body also relaxed, and its eyes looking at the crowd also softened slightly. Its body was full of scars and the pain was unbearable. Chapter 1540. Bailey Hongzhuang's actions were very fast. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang helped the wind spirit tiger bandage all its wounds. "Let's go." Bailey Hongzhuang stood up and said slowly. Hearing this, everyone nodded and turned to leave. However, just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were about to leave, the wind spirit tiger's roar sounded again. Roar, however, this roar was much softer than the one they had heard before. It contained complex emotions and was not fierce. Listening to this roar, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but turn their heads and look at the Wind Spirit Tiger again. They saw the Wind Spirit Tiger slowly stand up and make a move that surprised everyone. The Wind Spirit Tiger slowly placed the 3 cubs in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. It was obvious that it wanted Bailey Hongzhuang and the others to take the 3 cubs away. It is giving the cubs to us? Xia Jiqing was dumbfounded. She really could not believe that things would turn out like this. Originally, they hoped that they could have a good contract beast, but after seeing this scene of affection, they decided to give up on that selfish thought. They did not think that the Wind Spirit Tiger would suddenly make such a move. It really made them stunned. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked at the Wind Spirit Tiger in confusion. She did not understand why the Wind Spirit Tiger would make such a decision. After all, the Wind Spirit Tiger had tried so hard to protect its cubs before. Roar! The Wind Spirit Tiger roared again and reluctantly looked at the 3 cubs. It then turned around and left. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others stood in the same place and looked at the Wind Spirit Tiger gradually leaving. Their mood was very complicated. It made the right choice. Xiaobai said slowly. Humans may not understand, but as monsters, they understood why the Wind Spirit Tiger did this. After it saw that I had formed a contract with Master, it chose to keep the cubs in order to let the cubs have a better future. Baisher saw that the people did not understand and could not help but explain. It felt that we would treat its children well. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also understood. They did not expect the Wind Spirit Tiger to make such a choice. For a moment, everyone's mood was a bit complicated. However, as the Wind Spirit Tiger thought, they would treat the cubs well. In the future, the Wind Spirit Tiger would be their partner in life and death. Hongzhuang, let's leave too. Mo Yunjua looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and said. The other cultivators will come back immediately after they get rid of the monsters. If they were to be seen by the other cultivators, they would be attacked by the other cultivators. That would not be a good situation. Hearing Mo Yunjua's words, everyone immediately reacted. Let's go now. And Bailey Hongzhuang, the cultivators participating in the assessment would not be stupid, but the cultivators who were not to participate in the assessment cultivators would not be stupid. Would Hongzhuang they would find. And Hongzhuang was not a matter. Once they got rid of the monsters, they would definitely come back immediately. They still had 3 cubs in their hands. If someone were to come, it would be very inconvenient for them to fight. Let's leave in the opposite direction. We will not return to the city today. Gong Xiaoqing analyzed. Chapter 1541. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were very fast, rushing all the way to the front. Fortunately, they had discovered an extremely secretive cave. They believed that no other cultivators would know about it. They only needed to hide in the cave for a while. Everyone was using their fastest speed. If the other cultivators were to catch up to them, it would be a real fierce battle. They knew very well that as long as the cultivators from the other dynasties thought carefully, they would realize that the problem was with them. This was because ever since the demonic beasts appeared, they had disappeared from everyone's sight. As long as they connected all the dots, the answer was self-evident. As for the cultivators from other teams, they did not care at all. If they really wanted to fight, they would fight. The cultivators from the Tiangang dynasty had never been afraid of any other dynasty's team. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest left for some time, the cultivators from the 3 dynasties returned to their original spot. However, after a round of investigation, the figures of the Wind Spirit Tiger and its cub had long disappeared. Damn it! What the hell happened just now? We were chased by a group of demonic beasts for no reason and the ducks in our hands flew away. Fang Wenqing sat on the ground as his face was filled with rage. He felt that this was the most unlucky day in his life. Previously, he had been surrounded by so many demonic beasts. Not only was he exhausted, his body was also covered with injuries of various sizes. Most importantly, the Wind Spirit Tiger's cub had disappeared and he did not even know what had happened. This is too strange. Yu Junfei frowned. He had lived for so many years and had never encountered such a situation. It was simply too inconceivable. We must have fallen into someone else's trap. Cheng Hufeng's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look. Previously, when they were escaping, they had also encountered other cultivators. However, those monstrous beasts seemed to have locked onto them and only attacked them. It was as if they did not see the other cultivators. Just this point alone was enough to prove that they had fallen into a trap. What trap did we fall into? Fang Wenqing's face was filled with confusion. From the beginning to the end, he had not noticed anything happening. This did not make sense at all. Just as the cultivators from the three dynasties were puzzled, many teams had returned to their original spot. After noticing that their cub had disappeared, they immediately looked at the teams from the three dynasties. Sensing everyone's gaze, Fang Wenqing said coldly, "What are you looking at? If we had gotten the Wind Spirit Tiger's cub, would we still be here?" As soon as he said that, the other cultivators understood and smiled bitterly. They did not expect that they would lose the chance to get the cub just like that. Cheng Hufeng looked at the cultivators who kept returning, and an idea immediately appeared in his mind. "We'll just wait here. As long as it's a cultivator who's being chased by demonic beasts, he'll definitely return. If any team does not return, they are most likely the problem." Hearing Cheng Hifeng's words, Fang Wenqing and Yu Junfei's eyes lit up. "Not bad, this is a good idea." Chapter 1542. Tiangang Dynasty. Tiangang Dynasty's name appeared in everyone's mind. That was because other than the Tiangang Dynasty's team, every other dynasty's team had returned. Previously, due to the sudden appearance of the demonic beasts, they could not pay attention to their surroundings at all. Now, it seemed that it was most likely done by the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators. Tiangang Dynasty. Cheng Hufeng narrowed his eyes. He felt that this must be man-made, and the answer had already been revealed. If it were any other cultivator who did not obtain the Wind Spirit Tiger's cub, they would definitely return unwillingly. However, with the strength of the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators, it was impossible for them to be completely annihilated by the demonic beasts. Therefore, there was only one explanation. Everything was planned by the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators. For a moment, everyone's expression became extremely ugly. They did not expect that they would be set up by the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators. This was too depressing. Damn the Tiangang Dynasty. Fang Wenqing was furious. Now that he thought about it, the reason why the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators could be so comfortable and relaxed was most likely because they had already planned everything. That was why they were able to be so relaxed. If I meet the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators again, I will definitely kill them. Fang Wenqing's anger could not be quelled. He should have killed the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators earlier. Then such a problem would not have occurred now. Oh my god, it was actually done by the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators? This is really unexpected. How did they do it? This is too difficult. They were still in an alliance with us earlier. I didn't expect them to have already planned everything. At this moment, everyone reacted. Some were disgusted and some were impressed. From the perspective of a bystander, they had to admit that the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators were indeed capable. It was impossible for ordinary cultivators to think of such a method, but the Tiangang Dynasty's cultivators did it. Until now, after knowing everything, they still did not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest attracted the demonic beasts and only attacked them. The cultivators from the three dynasties looked at each other. They did not expect their flawless plan to be defeated by a small dynasty's team. Once this news got out, they would really lose face. In the next moment, Yu Junfei brought the group of cultivators and left. Let's go. Now that he knew the truth, there was no point in continuing to stay in the same place. It would only make him look foolish. Fang Wenqing coldly glanced at Yu Junfei, and immediately left with his team of cultivators. He knew that cooperating with a guy like Yu Junfei would not bring him any benefits. Now, it was still a situation of losing everything. His team had even lost a cultivator. It was simply not worth it. The cultivator from the Martial Dynasty didn't stay either. He quickly left as well. They believed that even if Bailey Hongzhuang and the others obtained the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub now, it would be useless. Because there were no sealing masters. As long as there was no sealing master, the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub would not be able to be sealed into a demonic beast egg. As a result, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could only carry the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub around. Chapter 1543. After the cultivators of the three dynasties left, the cultivators of the other dynasties were also aware of this. In fact, not only the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty, even if they obtained the cub of the Wind Spirit Tiger, they could only keep it by their side. Only after the end of the assessment could they contract with the Wind Spirit Tiger. Therefore they still had a chance. As long as they found the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty, they could take the Wind Spirit Tiger as their own. After the cultivators of the three dynasties indifferently left for a distance, they flew away. They believed that the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty would not be far away. They must find the cultivators of the Tiangang dynasty before the other cultivators. Otherwise, once they wandered around, there would be no hope in the end. While the other cultivators were struggling to find, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had already arrived at the hidden cave. This was also an accidental discovery when they were chasing the monsters. It was extremely hidden, and it was impossible for ordinary cultivators to find this place. Originally, they did not pay much attention to this cave after discovering it. After all, it had no use for them. They did not expect that this cave would help them a lot. It was really unexpected. Everyone sat down in the cave and restrained their aura. The location of their cave was not very far. Once it was discovered by the cultivators of the other dynasties, it would be troublesome. I can guarantee that those cultivators must have gone back and found out that the problem is with us. Dongfang Yu's face was filled with a faint smile. After thinking carefully, he had already thought of the development of this matter. Listening to Dongfang Yu's words, everyone nodded. This was also what they thought. So, they must be looking for our figures. We have to try to restrain our aura and not be discovered by them. Gong Xiaoqing said. As long as those cultivators searched this area, they would not come back. The most dangerous place was the safest place. Many times this was very true. I can already imagine Fang Wenqing's furious expression when he comes back and finds out that the cub of the wind spirit tiger was taken away by us. Haha. Xia Jiqing could not help but laugh out loud. Fang Wenqing's appearance before was really too annoying. With his temperament, he must have gone crazy by now. Smiles appeared on everyone's faces. Fang Wenqing had been so full of himself before, so his expression must be very interesting now. That kind of guy should be taught a lesson like this, quietly infuriating him to death. Yuan Xiaoman laughed. Looks like we have a lot more enemies this time. Mo Yunjue sat down where he was, his handsome face filled with a playful chuckle. Speaking of which, there weren't many teams that could cause as much trouble as they did. Everyone shrugged. In fact, they didn't want to cause so much trouble. However, these troubles would always inexplicably find them. Thus, they could only deal with it. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the 3 wind spirit tiger cubs who were still in a daze. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tenderness as she held them in her arms. These little fellows had just been born and had already experienced so many things, but they were still unaware of it. Chapter 1544. As Xia Jiqing's voice fell, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. In fact, they had never seen a sealer before and did not understand how a sealer sealed a monster egg. However, from the small number of sealers, they knew that sealing was definitely not a simple matter. Although Hongzhuang told them that she knew how to seal, this was really suspicious. This sealing technique was obviously not something that ordinary cultivators could come into contact with. In some small dynasties, it was impossible for a sealer to exist. Hongzhuang's previous identity was the daughter of the general's house of Fengbo country. It was reasonable to say that it was impossible for her to come into contact with all this. However, when they thought about how many incredible things had happened to Hongzhuang, they felt that this matter was not impossible. Therefore, now everyone just stared at Bailey Hongzhuang, waiting for the former to give them an answer. Mo Yunjue also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. He had seen a sealer before. Every sealer was a high existence and had certain eccentricities. In short, they were not very good people to deal with. Moreover, the sealers he had seen were very old. It was said that the young sealers had a high chance of failure. Once the seal failed, the monster's life would also be lost. Therefore, the young sealers could only try to seal some monster beasts that were only for ornamental purposes. Even so, the possibility of failure was still very high. The higher the level of the monster, the more difficult it was to seal and the higher the failure rate. With Hongzhuang's age, it should be very difficult to seal the wind spirit tiger. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the 3 wind spirit tigers in front of her, then smiled and said, "Let's wait for the various dynasties to search before we seal them." The sealing technique had always been a method that required patience. It usually required an absolutely quiet environment to be carried out meticulously. This was because every time there was a slight deviation, it could lead to the failure of the seal. This requirement was even higher than inscriptions, which was the reason why sealers were rare. The failure of the inscription was just a waste of some materials, but once the seal failed, it was the life of a newborn monster beast. Back then, when she was the head of the Bailey family, the young people of the family were in great need of contract beasts. However, there were no sealing masters in the family. Every time Patriarch Bailey returned from hunting young demonic beasts, he would need to pay a large sum of money to invite a sealing master. Sometimes he might not even be able to invite his sealing master back. Under such circumstances, in a fit of anger, she learned the sealing technique herself. Fortunately, her mental strength was already very strong, and when she was learning alchemy, her mental strength had become even sharper. This allowed her to learn the sealing technique a little faster. Even though she was talented, she still spent a lot of time on her studies. Since then, she had been in charge of sealing the clan's contracted beasts. Through this practice, her sealing technique became better and better, saving the clan a lot of money. However, after her inexplicable death, the clan had to hire a new sealing master again. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone nodded and turned their attention to the outside. They only hoped that those cultivators would leave quickly and that this cave was hidden enough to not be discovered by other cultivators. Chapter 1545. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others noticed the commotion outside. Damn those Tiangang dynasty cultivators. If I find them, I will make them regret what they did today. Fang Wenqing said angrily. Captain, we don't know which direction the Tiangang dynasty cultivators went. What if we are found by the Cloud Sword dynasty or the Martial dynasty? A cultivator asked worriedly. Fang Wenqing looked angrily at the man who spoke. You're asking me? Who am I supposed to ask? That's why I asked you to hurry up and find them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heard the commotion outside and could not help but smile. Sure enough, as they expected, Fang Wenqing was flustered and exasperated. Just as Yuan Xiaoman was about to speak, Bailey Hongzhuang made a shu gesture and stopped her from speaking. Just like how they could sense the situation of Fang Wenqing and the others, if they spoke, even if their voices were very soft, Fang Wenqing and the others could still hear them. Therefore, they could only conceal all their auras to ensure that they would not be seen. Yuan Xiaoman immediately covered her mouth. She almost forgot that the situation in front of her did not allow for any mistakes. Ugh! Suddenly a sound was heard. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were stunned for a moment before realizing that it was the sound of the wind spirit tiger cub. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang Mo Yunjue and Bailey Hongzhuang quickly covered the wind spirit tiger cub's mouth. If they were discovered by the Azure Forest Dynasty cultivators now, there would be more and more cultivators behind them. By then, it would be really troublesome. Fang Wenqing was about to leave after scanning the surroundings when he suddenly heard a soft sound. He could not help but stop and look in front of him in confusion. He did not know what that sound was. Fang Wenqing slowly approached Bailey Hongzhuang's position, while Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were already holding the weapons in their hands. Once Fang Wenqing came to the cave, they would immediately attack. No matter what, they could not give up on the wind spirit tiger cub. However, just as Fang Wenqing was getting closer to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, another aura came from behind. Fang Wenqing's face turned cold when he saw Yu Junfei. Although they had a short cooperation before, the conflict between the two teams could not be resolved. Yu Junfei glanced at the situation of Fang Wenqing and the others and said to the cultivators in the team, "There is no one here. Everyone continue forward." Seeing this, Fang Wenqing's expression became even uglier. Yu Junfei was completely treating him as an errand boy. Thinking of this, Fang Wenqing immediately called the other cultivators in the team. He would not let the Tiangang dynasty's cultivators find the cultivators from Tiangang dynasty's dynasty. After sensing that the Azure Forest dynasty and Cloud Sword dynasty's cultivators had left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they were not discovered. Bailey Hongzhuang released the hand that was covering the wind spirit tiger cub's mouth. The wind spirit tiger cub was looking at Bailey Hongzhuang in shock as it panted heavily. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other and smiled. After the teams from the two dynasties left, the rest was much easier. Chapter 1546. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others stayed in the cave for a day and night. After Baishe released his aura, the monster beasts did not dare to approach the cave. Originally, everyone relaxed after waiting for all the cultivators to leave, but Mo Yunjue still reminded everyone that the others might come back again. At first, everyone didn't believe it, but in the end, the facts clearly told them that it was all true. In the latter half of the night, the cultivators of the Martial dynasty came back again and searched the area again. In the end, they did not find their presence and left. It was not until later that there were no more movements from the cultivators of the other teams that everyone was completely relieved. This Martial dynasty's cultivator is truly extraordinary. That Qing Hufeng is really meticulous in his work. If it wasn't for Mo Yunjue reminding us, I'm afraid we would have been discovered. Yuan Jixin's face could not hide the sigh. Who would have thought that there would be cultivators coming back to check again in the latter half of the night? Bailey Hongzhuang also felt a little emotional. Just as she expected, among the teams of the three dynasties, the cultivators of the martial dynasty were the most cunning and intelligent. The fact was indeed so. This Cheng Hifeng's conduct made people feel a little apprehensive. In comparison, the cultivators of the Azure Forest dynasty and the Cloud Sword dynasty were much easier to deal with. Fortunately, we found this cave, otherwise we would have had to run all the way. Bai Junyu's face was full of smiles. Indeed, all of this was destined by fate. If they had not accidentally found this cave, their situation would be much worse than now. Hearing the word run, the three beasts could not help but look at each other. What they hated the most now was running away. In the desert world, they had to run for their lives almost every day, and it was really a life-and-death escape. Then what do we do now? Continue to stay here? Yuan Xiaoman could not help but ask. Mo Yunjue's eyes rippled with the light of thinking, and his voice was deep and confident. The best way for us now is to stay here. The cultivators of the various dynasties can't find us in the forest, so they will definitely wait for us near the city. Once we go to the city now, we will definitely be discovered. Staying here is the best choice. Hearing this, Dongfang Yu couldn't help but frown. Then, are we going to stay here for a while? With the character of the three great dynasties that were unwilling to give up, it was probably impossible for them to leave the city in a short period of time. As a result, they were trapped here. We need to stay here for now. I believe that the three dynasties won't be able to last long in the city. They will leave soon. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with bright and resplendent light. The cultivators of the three dynasties were full of confidence in themselves. Because in the end they would all appear in the same place. As long as the cultivators of the three dynasties found them before that, the Wind Spirit Tiger would still belong to them. Hearing this, everyone nodded. Given the current situation, this was their only choice. Let's complete the contract with the Wind Spirit Tiger Cub while we're outside. In this way, even if we encounter cultivators from the other dynasties, they would be helpless. Chapter 1547. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, a smile appeared on everyone's face. The cultivators from the various empires would never have thought that they would form a contract with a Wind Spirit Tiger. As such, when they met again, many cultivators would not attack them after knowing that they had no hope. That was because it was meaningless. The only thing they needed to be wary of was the cultivators from the three empires, especially the Azure Forest Empire. With Fang Wenqing's narrow-minded character, even if he knew that there was no hope, he would still want to kill them to vent his anger. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at everyone and said, "There are only 3 Wind Spirit Tiger Cubs here. It's hard to decide who will form a contract with them." Hearing this, everyone's expression changed a little. Everyone wanted to have a contract beast. Moreover, the Wind Spirit Tiger was already an excellent contract beast. No one was willing to miss out on it. However, there were so many of them but only 3 Wind Spirit Tigers. Therefore, there was bound to be someone who did not have one. The biggest problem was how to distribute them. For a moment, everyone fell into silence. It was indeed difficult for them to give up on such a matter. "I don't need it," Mo Yunjue said slowly. As soon as this was said, everyone looked at Mo Yunjue in surprise. In fact, from their point of view, Mo Yunjue would definitely get a Wind Spirit Tiger. This was because Mo Yunjue was extremely important in their team. He was powerful and would be of great help to the team. Therefore, one Wind Spirit Tiger belonged to Mo Yunjue and the rest had no objections. However, Mo Yunjue chose to give up. This was beyond their expectations. Mo Yunjue? Everyone looked at Mo Yunjue in confusion. They did not understand why Mo Yunjue chose to give up. Mo Yunjue waved his hand and said, "In comparison, you guys need it more than I do. I don't want to form a contract with it for the time being." Everyone frowned. They felt that Mo Yunjue was doing this for them. They immediately said, "This?" Bailey Hongzhuang looked deeply at Mo Yunjue. She knew that Mo Yunjue was speaking his true thoughts. Although she didn't know Mo Yunjue's identity, she was certain that Mo Yunjue's identity wasn't simple. With Mo Yunjue's status, it shouldn't be difficult for him to get a contract beast. What's more, Mo Yunjue was so strong, his contracted beast should also be very strong. Although the Wind Spirit Tiger's level was not bad, compared to Mo Yunjue, there was still a gap. "Then, other than me and Mo Yunjue, all of you have a chance. In order to be fair, you all stand in a circle." I will put the 3 wind spirit tigers in the middle. Whoever the wind spirit tiger goes to will be the master of the wind spirit tiger. How about it? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at everyone. This was the best way she had come up with so far. Of course, if you can discuss it yourself, then we will do it according to your discussion. Boss, don't you need the wind spirit tiger? Xia Jiqing saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had also withdrawn and couldn't help but ask. Boss's ability to contract beasts was obviously different from theirs. Each of them could only contract one beast, but Bailey Hongzhuang was obviously not the same. This wind spirit tiger was also a very good beast. Did boss not need it? Chapter 1548. Everyone couldn't help but look at Baisher, Xiao He and Xiao Bai beside Bailey Hongzhuang. It had to be said that Bailey Hongzhuang really didn't need them. The existence of Baisher, the Beast King, was already very amazing. Although they didn't know what species Xiao He and Xiao Bai were, they were very clear about how powerful Xiao He and Xiao Bai were. In comparison, the wind spirit tigers were not as powerful as Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contract beasts. Mo Yunjue chuckled. You should think about your own situation. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing and the others looked at each other. Hongzhuang, let's do as you say. This was indeed the best way so far. No matter who the wind spirit tigers chose, everyone would not be unwilling. It was really a good idea. After seeing everyone agree, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Okay. Soon everyone stood in a circle. Bailey Hongzhuang put the 3 wind spirit tigers in the center, and then she walked out of the circle. Now it was up to the 3 wind spirit tigers to choose. Everyone's eyes fell on the 3 wind spirit tigers. They were curious as to which of the 3 wind spirit tigers would be fated with. The 3 wind spirit tigers stood in the same place, apparently not knowing what choice they were making. Xia Jiqing and the others were looking at the wind spirit tigers curiously and nervously, only hoping that the wind spirit tigers would choose them. The 3 wind spirit tigers squinted their small eyes. In fact, they had just been born and their eyes were not fully open yet. Even when they walked, they were still staggering. At this moment, they were constantly sniffing the air and walking forward. The way they walked was indescribably cute. The process of choosing was very slow because the 3 wind spirit tiger cubs were simply walking forward aimlessly, stopping and even rolling. Baisher looked at the appearance of the 3 wind spirit tigers and his eyes flashed with a bright and strange light. Back then, when Master had just done July with it, it was probably similar to this. Xia Jiqing and the others couldn't help but bend down and look at the 3 wind spirit tigers. Their cute appearance really made people's hearts soften. In this process, the 3 wind spirit tigers also slowly approached the front. However, when the wind spirit tigers made their choice, everyone looked at this scene and their expressions changed a bit. Because the wind spirit tigers chose Xia Jiqing, Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman. After noticing this scene, Xia Jiqing's group's eyes couldn't help but have some fluctuations in their eyes. Gong Shaoqing and the others looked at Xia Jiqing and the others. They did not expect that the 3 wind spirit tigers would make such a choice. This was too special. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue looked at each other and fell into silence. Bailey Hongzhuang had always known that Bai Junyu liked Xia Jiqing, but Xia Jiqing had always been slow. In addition, although Bai Junyu usually talked a lot, when it came to critical moments he always dropped the chain. Whenever it was time to confess, Bai Junyu would be too stupid to speak. However, this matter was only known to those who had known Bai Junyu for a long time. Since Yuan Xiaoman joined the team, everyone found that Yuan Xiaoman and Bai Junyu were very familiar with each other. Bai Junyu talked to Yuan Xiaoman more than Xia Jiqing. Chapter 1549. However, Bai Junyu himself was also a fool. Everyone had already felt that this situation was unusual, but Bai Junyu didn't know anything. Now that the relationship between Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman was getting closer, Yuan Jixin, who didn't know the reason, thought that Yuan Xiaoman and Bai Junyu were a couple. Therefore, Yuan Jixin was also very good to Bai Junyu, and sometimes created opportunities for Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman. As a result, this matter was completely messed up. Because this was a relationship problem between Xia Jiqing, Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman, no one dared to intervene. However, now that the 3 wind spirit tigers had made such a choice, this love triangle was really not messy enough. Even though Mo Yunjue didn't know much about what had happened before, during this period of time with his keen observation, he also discovered the problem. The atmosphere froze for a moment and everyone looked at each other. For such a strange situation, everyone really didn't know what to say. After a while, Bailey Hongzhuang took the lead and said, Since the Wind Spirit Tiger has made a choice, then I will seal the Wind Spirit Tiger first. With Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone nodded and the slightly awkward atmosphere eased a bit. Bailey Hongzhuang picked up a Wind Spirit Tiger and turned to the crowd. You wait outside now, I will go into the cave to seal it. Okay. Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the cave with the Wind Spirit Tiger, and the three beasts stayed at the door. This kind of very important thing couldn't be disturbed, otherwise it would be terrible if it failed. Bailey Hongzhuang sat in front of the Wind Spirit Tiger, and the yuan power and mental power in her body spread out at the same time. The requirement for the seal was very high for the mental power, and the consumption was also very high, so yuan power was used as an auxiliary. What she needed to do was to use her mental power to write a rune and seal the Wind Spirit Tiger in it. Bailey Hongzhuang divided her mental power into strands of filament-like existence, and used them to write the rune. In her previous life, her cultivation was stronger than it was now. In this life, her elemental energy was undoubtedly weaker. However, after transmigrating, her spiritual energy was much stronger than before. In this way, although there was a certain gap in strength, she believed that the success rate wouldn't be much lower than in her previous life. Under the control of Bailey Hongzhuang, strands of spiritual power intertwined and weaved into the shape of a rune. Just looking at the countless strands of spiritual energy was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Even Bailey Hongzhuang's forehead was covered in sweat. That was because the consumption of energy was not small at all. While Bailey Hongzhuang was doing the sealing, the Wind Spirit Tiger cub stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. It sat there motionlessly as if an invisible force had sealed it. As Bailey Hongzhuang sealed the Wind Spirit Tiger cub in the cave, Gong Xiaoqing and the others sat down on the ground. They had never been in contact with a sealing master, and they didn't know how long Bailey Hongzhuang would take to seal it. The only thing they could do was to wait outside. I don't know if the boss can succeed. There was a touch of worry in Xia Jiqing's eyes. It was the Wind Spirit Tiger that ran to her side that was being sealed. Chapter 1550. With Hongzhuang's strength, I believe there won't be a problem. Dong Fangyu looked at Xia Jiqing with a smile. From the time they met Hongzhuang until now, as long as Hongzhuang had confidence in something, there had never been a problem. Xia Jiqing held her chin with both hands, and there was still some worry in her eyes. She had always believed in the strength of the boss, but she had never heard that the boss could seal a monster beast. Moreover, she had never known that the boss could seal a monster beast. Although she and the Wind Spirit Tiger cub had only met for a short time, looking at its ignorant and cute appearance, her heart softened. Even if the contract could not be successful, she did not want the Wind Spirit Tiger cub to die. Yes, when has the boss ever had a problem? Yuan Jixin smiled. There will be no problem. Xia Jiqing nodded slightly. She also believed in the boss. The boss had never had a problem doing things, and she believed that this time would be no exception. Before, she was worried and confused, but now that she thought about it carefully, her mood calmed down. Mo Yunjue sat quietly on the side and entered a state of cultivation. After everyone saw Mo Yunjue like this, there was a trace of admiration in their hearts. In their team, the strongest were Mo Yunjue and Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue had always been meticulous in their cultivation, and seized all the time to cultivate. In the process of getting along, they had already understood each other clearly. Just like Bailey Hongzhuang and Mo Yunjue on the Heaven Stairway, their performance was so amazing. For a long time they had also been cultivating desperately, but compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, there was still a certain gap. Gong Xiaoqing's feelings were the deepest. When he was at the Azure Water School, everyone said that he was the one who cultivated the most. Dong Fangyu felt that he did not know how to enjoy life, and only knew how to cultivate foolishly. Ever since he met Bailey Hongzhuang, he knew that there was always someone better than him. Bailey Hongzhuang was far more serious than him in cultivation. This was also the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang was stronger than them even though she was younger than them. Thinking of this, Gong Xiaoqing couldn't help but glance at Dong Fangyu. Back then, although Dong Fangyu's cultivation talent was not bad, he had never put much effort into it. Later on, they suddenly started cultivating desperately because of Bailey Hongzhuang. Speaking of which, after meeting Bailey Hongzhuang, their lives changed a lot. In the next moment, Gong Xiaoqing also entered a state of cultivation. The other cultivators closed their eyes to cultivate. Only Xia Jiqing, Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman were still sitting and waiting. Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman had to look after the Wind Spirit Tiger cub, so they couldn't cultivate. Xia Jiqing was wholeheartedly concerned about the matter of Bailey Hongzhuang's seal. Even if she was cultivating, she could not calm down and could only wait. Jiqing, Hongzhuang will succeed. Bai Junyu looked at Xia Jiqing, his eyes full of concern and relief. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing nodded slightly. Just as she was about to talk to Bai Junyu, Yuan Xiaoman's voice sounded. Junyu is right, Jiqing, you don't have to worry too much. Boss will definitely be fine. Yuan Xiaoman was sitting beside Bai Junyu, her charming face filled with a thick smile. Xia Jiqing swallowed back the words she was about to say. She immediately nodded, and the smile on her face revealed a bit of awkwardness that only she understood. Chapter 1551. Bai Junyu noticed that Xia Jiqing's expression seemed to be a little different, and his eyes could not help but flash a hint of doubt. Jiqing, did you want to say something just now? Xia Jiqing looked up and saw Yuan Xiaoman and Bai Junyu looking at her with concern. She shook her head. No. Oh. Bai Junyu looked away with some disappointment. He wanted to confess to Xia Jiqing more than once, but he couldn't say anything at the critical moment. Moreover, he recently faintly felt that the distance between him and Jiqing was gradually alienating, but he didn't understand what was going on. It was really depressing. He wanted to find a chance to ask Jiqing, but he was worried that all this was just his own misunderstanding. If Jiqing didn't like him, then once he confessed, their relationship would become particularly awkward. When he thought of this, he was even more unable to say it. Junyu, what name are you going to give the contract beast after you contract it? Yuan Xiaoman teased the wind spirit tiger cub in front of her while asking Bai Junyu. Hearing this, Bai Junyu thought for a while, then looked at Xia Jiqing next to him and said, Jiqing, what name are you going to give it? Xia Jiqing was slightly stunned and she couldn't help but think about it. She really didn't think about this problem before. Once the contract was made, she would have to give the contract beast a name. Just what name should she give it? Xia Jiqing frowned. It was really not easy to give a name. Suddenly, Xia Jiqing's eyes fell on Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Boss's name was so simple, she should follow boss when it came to naming. My contract beast's name will be Xiao Feng. Xia Jiqing smiled slightly. Wind Spirit Tiger, she chose the first word. Not only was it easy to remember, but it was also the same type as Xiao He and Xiao Bai. In this way it was very cooperative. Xiao He and Xiao Bai also nodded after hearing Xia Jiqing's name. Sure enough, it wasn't just their master who didn't have a talent for naming. Xia Jiqing wasn't much better. Now that they had another contracted beast to keep them company, they were happy to see it. After hearing the name given by Bailey Hongzhuang, Bai Junyu immediately understood the origin of the name and had an idea in his mind. If that's the case, then my contract beast will be called Little Tiger. It's simple and easy to remember. Xia Jiqing couldn't help but look at Bai Junyu. One was Little Wind, the other was Little Tiger. Their contract beasts were both Wind Spirit Tigers, which was great. Yuan Xiaoman frowned, her mind constantly thinking, and said, then my contract beast will be called Xiaoling, adding up to a Wind Spirit Tiger. Isn't that good? With Yuan Xiaoman's words falling, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also nodded slightly, but they couldn't help but feel a little strange. Gong Shaoqing and the others, who were originally cultivating, heard the words of Xia Jiqing and the others, and the helplessness in their hearts became deeper and deeper. If this complicated love triangle continued to develop like this, they really didn't know what it would become in the future. They wanted to remind Bai Junyu, but they couldn't understand Xia Jiqing's thoughts. In fact, Xia Jiqing had never expressed her thoughts. When Yuan Xiaoman had not joined the team, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were also like this. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.